In this film, we have shared the narrative between a psychiatrist called by the prosecution, Dr. Parton Dietz, a defense psychologist, Dr. Judith Becker, and the policeman in charge of the case, Detective Dennis Murphy, reading from Dahmer's confession.
He remembered his early family life as being one of extreme tension. States the tension came from the relationship that existed between his mother and his father. He stated that they were constantly at each other's throat and arguing. He stated his mother appeared to have some psychiatric problems and, in fact, had suffered a nervous breakdown at one time during his early childhood. He stated that she was on medication, had been seeing a doctor for much of the time. He states that he was advised by relatives that his mother had suffered a postpartum depression after he was born. And he took that to indicate that he was at least partially the problem for his parents' bad marital status. He stated he believed his mother became depressed after his birth and never quite fully recovered, and therefore he felt a certain amount of guilt in regards to the bad marriage of his parents. He said as a teenager of 15 or 16, he realized that he was a homosexual. He never had any interest in women, and he had no idea why he was a homosexual. But he distinctly remembers in high school and during his teenage years that he was only attracted to men. See, it was at this time he began to fantasize of killing human beings. He also began picking up animals which were found on the road, which had been killed apparently by other vehicles. He would bring them home to his house, and he would use a knife in order to cut them up, cut them open, and see what was inside of them and what they looked like. See, at the time his mother took his younger brother, who was approximately 6 years younger than him, and she moved out and left him alone in the house. He said at this time he started having strong feelings about being left all alone, and it was at this time he remembered having strong desires for not wanting to have people leave him. He stated that at this time he began hating to sleep alone at night. He further indicates that it was about this time in his life that he became familiar with alcohol, and he immediately became a heavy drinker and abused alcohol on a regular basis.
The timing of his first fantasies of bringing another person under his control in order to engage in sexual behaviors was sometime during the high school years. At various times, the specific age and grade that Mr. Dahmer has said this occurred has varied within a year or two, but it seems to be around age 15 or 16 that he first had sexual thoughts of striking another person and rendering him unconscious by a blow to the back of the neck, and then making sexual use of the unconscious body. The first time he tried or meant to act on that was when, at around that age, he found a particular male jogger attractive to him, and he, I believe, broke off a baseball bat, and then he concealed himself in some brush near where the jogger was expected to pass, with the idea that if the jogger came by, he would strike him on the back of the neck, make him unconscious, and enjoy the man's body sexually for a time. The jogger didn't come by, and so that didn't come to pass, and Mr. Dahmer never saw the man again. But that seems to be the first effort to put this fantasy into action.
In the summer of 1978, he then had a car and was living alone at the house. He had been drinking and was returning home when he saw a hitchhiker. The hitchhiker was not wearing a shirt, and he debated about whether or not to pick him up. He finally decided to pick this man up. The man's name was, and it's all right to mention the names of the victims.
That's known.
His name was Stephen Hicks, who was approximately 19 years of age. Stephen Hicks got into the car and agreed to go back to the house, to Jeffrey's house. Jeffrey reported that they talked and smoked some marijuana. He reported that it was clear to him that Stephen Hicks was not gay, however, he wanted to keep him there. While Stephen was sitting on the bed, Jeffrey hit him in the head with a barbell and then strangled him with that barbell. Jeffrey recalled having smoked 1 or 2 joints and had consumed a 12-pack of beer that day. The next morning, he went to the store and purchased a large hunting knife, and he went to the crawl space and dismembered the body. He cut off the arms and legs. He recalled opening up the belly.
Now, at this juncture, this is the first time he opens up the belly of anything other than the dead animals, right?
That's correct. At 3 a.m. as he drove to the dump, he was pulled over by police for driving left of the center line. He indicated that he passed the sobriety test. The policeman shined the flashlight in the back seat of the car and noticed the trash bags. Jeffrey told him that he was taking the trash to the landfill. He reported that there was a slight odor because he had had the body for 1 or 2 days. The policeman let him go. Jeffrey turned around and went home and put the bags in the crawl space. He brought the head upstairs, laid it on the floor, and masturbated in front of it. The next morning, he put the bags behind the house in the woods. He burned the clothes of the victim and then threw the knife and Stephen's necklace into the river. I asked Jeffrey how he felt about this, about those actions, and he reported that he was high-strung, nervous, apprehensive, and thought a lot about what he had done. He subsequently went to Ohio State University for 3 months. He stated that he, quote, flunked out, end quote. He reported that during this time, he drank all of the time. By this time, his father had moved back into the house with his new wife, Sherry. His father and Sherry thought it would be a good idea for Jeffrey to join the Army.
He stated he believed the reason he did not kill and dismember anymore while he was serving his tour of duty in Germany was because he enjoyed the structure of the Army. During the entire tour of duty, he lived on base and was in a dorm with 3 other men. He stated that he enjoyed the Army and wished that he would have finished his entire tour of duty. However, his abuse of alcohol made it impossible, and the Army let him go 6 months before his tour of duty was up.
He was employed at a chocolate factory where he mixed chocolate. While working at the chocolate factory, he made some friends but did not socialize with them after work. In essence, his life consisted of working and on weekends going to bookstores, gay bars, and bath clubs. He reported that at the baths the notion was, quote, sex, anything goes, end quote. He reported that he used condoms some of the time. He stated that he liked being the active person in sex, that he only allowed anal penetration once or twice because it hurt him. He reported...
We are not using the name of the drug.
I will not.
Okay, thanks.
All right. He reported that he started using, and I'll just say a drug that had sedating effects.
Sleeping pills, I think.
Right. He started using sleeping pills during this period because some guys wanted to perform anal sex and he did not want to. This was a way of keeping them. Specifically, he did not want to be the recipient of anal sex, and consequently, if he were to drug the person, they would then fall asleep and he would not have to participate in anal sex where he was the receptive partner. That is where the person would put their penis in him. He reported that he would go to the baths on weekends and have approximately 3 or 4 partners. He was trying to control his compulsion, so he went to a store when it was about to close. He hid out in the store, and then he stole a mannequin from the store and brought it to his house. He kept this mannequin for 2 weeks. He would stand over the mannequin and masturbate. His grandmother saw the mannequin and asked him where he got it. He then took the mannequin out and disposed of it. At age 26, he reported that he was heavily into the bath clubs. He reported that at this time he was working the night shift at the chocolate factory, would go to the bars on weekends, usually around 2 a.m. He reported that once he got to the bathhouse, he would find a person and then lay next to the person and masturbate and engage in what he called, quote, light sex, end quote. He reported that most of the men he met there did not want just the light sex, but wanted what he called, quote, heavy sex, end quote. He stated that once the person was asleep, he did not feel quite so rushed or pressured with the person. He reported that he would fix a drink in which he would put approximately 5 sleeping pills, and this would keep the person asleep for approximately 8 hours. He stated he would stay with the person, staying awake for about 3/4 of the time, and then he would sleep with the person. Usually, he would masturbate 3 times during that period. He reported that he never injured anyone and never recalled attempting to strangle any of these men that he stayed with at the bathhouse. He stated that once he was in the room, he would have some conversation with the person, mix them a drink, and kiss them. The person would then get groggy, and the person would then fall asleep. He indicated that he would only experience an erection about 10% of the time when the person was in an awakened state. He reported that once the person fell asleep, he had complete control and could do what he wanted at his leisure. He did not have to entertain the person, and he felt that he could leave the room if he wanted to. He indicated that he had drugged 10 or 15 people before the management learned what he was doing. Subsequently, his membership was revoked. He then started using a local hotel room, and he stated that at this point, the bathhouse had been a much more controlled environment.
Now, he's telling you that when they're in an awakened state, he can only do something 10% of the time.
He could only get an erection 10% of the time.
Did you ask him about the other times when they were asleep?
Yeah, when they were asleep, he was able to get erections, and I think it's somewhere here in my notes, it was either 90 or 100% of the time.
This has got to be done. Who are these people that died? You didn't see their relatives come in and testify because there was a guilty plea. You didn't hear the facts in great detail. I don't want you to forget it. I don't want you to forget who they are. Sometimes, and this is when I'm in my work, naturally I see people getting very concerned about a defendant, what's happened to a defendant. And because the victim is gone and dead, the victim isn't there to say, hey, what about me? What about me? Don't forget Stephen Twomey, who died in the Ambassador Hotel with the defendant.
He encountered Mr. Twomey while he was waiting at a bus stop. He had already obtained his hotel room at the Ambassador, which he believes is located on 24th in Wisconsin. He'd gotten the room earlier with the plan that if he had encountered someone, he would take them there for the purpose of having sex with them. He had already purchased some sleeping pills, which he had at the room for the purpose of rendering anyone he brought back there helpless so he could have sex with them. He spoke with Twomey and asked him if he wanted to spend the night with him at the hotel room. Twomey agreed. Dahmer does not recall if he offered him money to come to the room or not. Upon arrival at the hotel, both Dahmer and Twomey got undressed and laid on the bed. At that time, they had what Mr. Dahmer called light sex. He described this as hugging, kissing, and mutual masturbation. After about an hour or two, Mr. Dahmer made a drink for Mr. Twomey, at which he put the sleeping pills. Mr. Twomey drank this, fell asleep, and Mr. Dahmer kept drinking and eventually fell asleep himself. Mr. Dahmer related that when he woke up, he was lying on top of Mr. Twomey, and Dahmer's forearms were visibly bruised. He saw that Mr. Twomey was obviously dead. He was bleeding from the head, and his chest was crushed in, and some of the bones were broken.
He reports blacking out and waking up in the morning. Stephen was in bed on his back. Jeffrey recalls being on top of him. He reported that Stephen's head was over the side of the bed and there was a bruise on his chest. He stated that he, Jeffrey, had a bruise on his arm. Jeffrey was shocked when he saw that Stephen was dead. He stated that he had no intention of murdering him. Seeing Stephen dead brought back memories of 1978 and his first victim, Stephen Hicks. He stated that he had paced the floor, felt horrified, shocked, and frightened, and could not believe this had happened. He then put the body in a closet and went to a mall. He bought a suitcase and subsequently put the victim inside of the suitcase. He then rented the room for another night. At 1 a.m., he checked out and took a taxi to his grandmother's house. He kept the body in the fruit cellar for approximately 9 days. One day while his grandmother was at church, he laid the body out and, according to Mr. Dahmer, quote, slit open the belly and masturbated.